Hello and welcome to CyberLab's latest podcast, and today we're going to be talking about AI and cybersecurity explained. Not sure whether we're going to explain all of it, but hopefully we'll give you enough information that Gen AI and these sorts of terms are no longer things that you just think, I don't know what that is. You'll have a bit more of an idea of it. I'm Adam Gleeson, Vendor Alliance Manager here at CyberLab, and joining me today, we're really pleased to have Dave Mareels here. Dave is quite the catch to get because he's really, really busy. Do you want to just give him a little bit about your history, where you've come from and what you're doing now, Dave?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Adam. And hi, everyone. I'm Dave Mareels. I'm Senior Director in Product Management in the Security Operations Business Unit of Sophos. So managed services are really my remit. So managed detection and response and managed risk, which is a new service, sort of tenable vulnerability management as a service.
The next big thing.
It's the next big thing, the next big service expansion. So a bunch of PMs and engineers that we deliver against the roadmap. All things managed services and all the way down to sort of the data. I believe good MDR is rooted in good knowledge of that data, of what we're pulling in, and I'm sure we'll talk about that soon in this podcast. But prior to that, I was 2.5 years only within Sophos, and prior to that, I was having fun in cybersecurity startup world, mate. So I was the co-founder and CEO of a small company called Sophos, which was at the pub. I would say I was trying to build the poor man's Splunk. So very much sort of that data middleware. How do we process data? How do we normalize it, correlate it, and all that good stuff? And then Sophos acquired that technology to put it under the hood of MDR and XDR.
Yeah. And I think it just that entire MDR platform and solution just goes from strength to strength as new features are added and new integrations. It's really good. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what Gen AI actually means. And I think in a shift, this is going to be me predominantly talking at you because I've recently been learning about this stuff, so I'm still got a lot to learn. But one of the things that sort of we talked about before is that I often say I don't like people talking about AI because I think that when people talk about AI, they're maybe sci-fi fans and they're thinking about these computers taking over the world. And when they talk about AI, they're actually talking about sentience. And artificial intelligence isn't sentience. It's something that will give us answers back based upon the data that has already been put into it. And this big thing that we've all heard about, ChatGPT and Gen AI and this, that, and the other, this is part of a paradigm shift. So AI is not something new. The traditional AI and machine learning was all based on large language models. And what does that mean? The simplest way that I've been able to wrap my head around it is that if you think of it as a series of different sentences that have been put into the language model. And then when you ask a question, so, what color is milk, for example, or something like that, it will then go through its language model and find and try and intuit, okay, I've heard this statement talk about milk and this talk about this, so I think that the answer is going to be white or creamy colored. And Gen AI takes that one step further by using foundational models, which I'm not going to try and describe, but what they are better at doing than large language models is being able to intuit that response. So you put a question in there that, if we use the same example again, what color is something or other? Yeah. In the previous large language model, the most accurate way for it to write it is if it already has that sentence in there, the color of this is this, or... Whereas with generative AI, it doesn't need that core sentence. It can intuit what the color of, or what the answer to the question is from the data that it's got that is, questions that may be around that. And that's kind of the simplest way. That's probably an oversimplification. All of the Gen AI experts watching this are probably rolling their eyes and saying he doesn't know what he's talking about. But that is what makes sense to me. And,
well, I think Gen AI, generative, so it can generate. So basically what you're saying, it can generate, it can create, and I think that's the definition a lot of people say. What's Gen AI? Well, clues in the name, really. Absolutely. It can create things, it can craft an email, it can tell you what the color.
And that's why it's becoming so useful in the enterprise, because it's gone from something that you put in, with the previous ones, whenever in the previous incarnations of any AI engines I've worked with. It's like you've got to be very specific about the information that you put in, otherwise you're not getting anything out. And very quickly, it's just you sort of come to the conclusion this isn't the right way for me to be solving this particular issue or trying to find that knowledge. Whereas with the generative AI, it absolutely, even I've been taken aback when using Copilot and stuff like that, how accurate the results are that come up. I went to an event yesterday that one of our distributors was holding, And what they had done is they'd used ChatGPT and they'd asked it a question about CyberLab. And then it printed out. They did it for every one of the delegates that were there. And it gave us a reasonably, CyberLab's fairly new, and we've got a lot of different things have happened within the history of CyberLab and within the Chess Cybersecurity Organisation. So it wasn't completely correct, but for something that someone's just gone, tell me about CyberLab, what they do and who they are and this, that and the other, who are the most notable people. It was pretty impressive that the information that this thing had gone out, scraped off of the internet and come back with it. And obviously its core language model was not, it didn't use the language model that it had to answer the question in that way. It went out and it found the information itself, or it asked, it used the language model that it had to formulate new questions to go and find out where the answers to the question that I had asked came from. Now, historically, this was always done as unsupervised learning, or rather, it was more supervised learning on structured data. Gen AI is also a sort of a paradigm shift in that it's been designed so that it can do unstructured learning on unsupervised learning on unstructured data. And originally, when they first started to try and do this with Gen AI, performance was a massive problem because you need huge amounts of compute resource in order for it to do all of these transactions that it's trying to do. So consequently, the cost of AI tends to be, Gen AI tends to be quite hard. Yeah. You need to have the NVIDIA, or typically NVIDIA vGPU resource that you're using to actually give it that parallel processing power. But some of the advantage, and I feel like I'm just talking at you here, Dave, but it was, like I said, I wanted to do this myself. The advantages of Gen AI are the performance and the productivity gains that we've just been talking about now. There are, however, disadvantages. I touched upon the compute requirements. There are now data centers popping up all over the place. Lots and lots of people are investing in huge swathes of hardware to build these server farms that are designed purely for processing Gen AI requests. So that they're very, very beefy. I mean, it's going back, put my old end user computing hat on. It's sort of the specification of these hosts kind of make me drool, because I would have loved to have architected VDI environments that had that much compute resource available to it. The final disadvantage, and I think this is really important, and this is something that I kind of touched upon it earlier, was that I didn't really trust what was going in there, and that's even more of a problem now, because the AI is going out, and a lot of the learning that it's doing is it's going out unsupervised, and it's trying to figure out things itself by asking different questions. Now, of course, it's using the internet as that resource, and there's lots and lots of good internet news on the internet, but as we all know, there's also a lot of bad information, misinformation, stuff that people are just getting wrong. So that is also one of the drawbacks, because the AI isn't smart enough to completely remove that. I think it can remove quite a bit of it now. And it's something that all of the technology giants are working on building that piece out so that the trustworthiness of the data is there. But it's something that we always need to bear in mind.
Yeah, I think everyone can sort of look back and, well, if you're using the ChatGPTs and the other LLMs that you're using, you've probably got an example that comes to mind of how confidently wrong it can be at times as well, based on that. And I heard a funny example. I think it was some tech founder talking about their sales team. They're using, it's obviously really popular in sort of the sales and craft me an email, find me a prospect, and outbounding in the outbounding cadence. And they were using it for like the reconnaissance, find something about this person, try to relate to them, and then relate to how our product could help. And he got it so confidently wrong that it was so embarrassing for the brand. I think the CEO had to reach out to this person and basically went out to this prospect, and the prospect's father had just passed away. And it said, and it linked that in, and it said, "Oh, I just heard that your father's died. I just wanted to say X, Y, and Z. Here's how software can help." And so, when you go confidently wrong in that sort of magnitude, it can be brand damaging. So the curation and the management of it to ensure when you're reaching out, and you need to have sort of the QA almost department of, are we sense checking this stuff before it goes out?
Yeah.
So,
and that's that would be quite, that's making me cringe internally quite hard hearing something like that. So all right, I'm just conscious of time. So one of the things that we've talked about, and you and I are both on exactly the same page in this, is something called Amara's Law. So for those of you listening that don't know what Amara's Law is, it was coined by a science fiction author whose name I neglected to write down here.
Amara, I think.
It was. I've got a feeling it wasn't. It was in relation to something else. There was a bit of a story about it, and I was so busy on getting the technology down that I missed the actual the sort of anecdote piece of it. Amara's law states that we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. And the implication of that really is that the true impact of technology is something that often emerges gradually over time. And I think, that just off the top of my head, mobile phones, for example, they started off as just, it was a phone. It was something that you could walk around with a phone. Yeah. Then came SMS, then came smartphones, and now we've got this thing, it's we've got a computer that's way more powerful than the computers we used to use in work sort of 15 years ago. Yeah. And server virtualization struck me as another one that sort of, they started off doing it, and then once it started to hit its stride, there was lots of other key capabilities that they could leverage and use it for different sort of applications. I actually heard that there was a trend towards de-virtualization, but that's probably a conversation for another one. It's one of the potential one of the other potential ones. But it can also go the other way as well, that the initial overestimation of a new technology becomes a bit of sort of smoke and mirrors, and it doesn't actually transpire. And the examples, I was kind of conflicted about this. Bitcoin was quoted as one of these things, that it was overestimated. I think that the expectations of it could have been realistic. Yeah. And it might just take longer for that to come.
Bitcoin, I mean, today I think it's the all-time record high now, right now. I think
it goes through,
pounds or something, it's insane.
Yeah, a member of my family works in the banking industry, and one of the things that they, I found it interesting that the impact that the technology had on the financial sector was that during the sort of the initial sort of boom with Bitcoin and stuff like that, a lot of people were taking out financial loans and stuff like that to fund it, and it was crashing and they were losing everything. Yeah. So the banks, I believe in general, have then sort of said, we can't finance this anymore because it's in people's own best interests. And it's one of those things that I kind of liked when you think back to what the banks were like 20 years ago, and they're a lot more, I think they're a lot more human now. They try to, I'm sure people would disagree with that, but what I hear from how they operate.
But back to Amara's law, you're absolutely seeing that now with Gen AI, right? It's everyone, this is the hype. Every single event is, all the VC money is being pumped into Gen AI and security, and as long as there's a Gen AI company, that's where the valuations are high. And so we've got this huge Amara's law, right here and now, which is like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. But no one's, I don't think, and we haven't done this for cloud, and like you say, mobile, all these big platform milestones and shifts. We haven't really, we're not going to see that impact for a while, and everyone's scrambling. Where's the Gen AI use case? And almost like you've got consultants saying, we've got businesses coming saying, we need Gen AI, and then figure it. So whatever the question is, the answer is Gen AI.
It's the typical knee-jerk thing, though. That it's like, oh, this is a really good thing for us to have, but you have to understand how you're going to actually apply it. And I think that's maybe what businesses need help with, is understanding how to apply it best for them. Correct, yeah. But just going back to the sort of the overinflated expectations, there's a graphic, and it's Gartner's hype cycle, and I think this describes the trend that we see with new technologies, especially ones that do have longevity in them, and they stick around and they continue to grow, and we're kind of either on the way up on the peak of inflated expectations, and soon to follow will be the trough of disillusionment, which it makes me laugh every time, where people start to realise, oh right, it won't do this for us, and it won't do that, and it then starts to then, they call it the slope of enlightenment, where people actually start to really squeeze it and get the most out of it when they've now learned what they can do with it, they've learned what they can't do with it. They then learn to apply what they know they can do with it to make things better.
Well, I think it's similar to mobile cloud, right? Cloud, it first comes out, what are we going to do? And you have this huge, what do they call it on the cycle, right? Right at the top when it first comes out.
The technology trigger is the first one.
And everyone goes wild. But you fast forward to today, I think most, if not every single company on the planet is some sort of cloud company. They have most, right? Vast majority. So like you can basically say with a high degree of confidence, most companies today is a cloud company.
They will
in some way or form.
I would say exactly, without shadow of a doubt, they have elements of their infrastructure, whether it's their data, whether it's their disaster recovery, whether it's business continuity or something like that. There's a critical part of the organization is now
somewhere in the cloud,
sitting in the cloud.
Yeah, so that's probably another good example of you probably couldn't, if you came out early to said every single company in the world will be a cloud company, I think people would be going, whoa, you're delusion.
Well, certainly in the early stages of adoption, I mean, maybe once we started to get past the peak of inflated expectations where people were going, right, let's move everything to the cloud. And a lot of organizations did that, like just blindly, and then suddenly went, this is like crippling us. It's not working very well. And again, in my background with end user computing, when I was talking to customers about whether they wanted to deploy an on-premises like hardware-based solution, or whether they wanted to leverage cloud technologies that would deliver that VDI or RDS end user computing environment, there were a lot of things, sort of individual triggers that it's like, well, where's your data going to be? Because if your data is going to be on-prem, it's not going to work putting your VDI workloads in the cloud. And things like that started to come out as databases were sort of, physical databases got virtualized. Well, we won't virtualize it, we'll just virtualize it and put it straight up in the cloud.
More and more goes out.
And it worked for some people, and then a lot of people were then having to go, no, right, now we've got to spend a load more money and bring this stuff back because we can't work as efficiently as we did. But inevitably, I think most organizations will start off with stuff in the cloud with some stuff on-prem, but as that grows longer in the tooth and they come to a point where it's like, right, we either need to replace this or migrate away from it, then and soon enough replacing it becomes impractical, and then they have to bite the bullet and migrate away from it.
Well, but I think the same trend is going to happen with Gen AI. I think it's the same sort of thing where long term, I think this is a massive leveling up, right? This is it's almost the same sort of platform shift, the internet, the mobile, the cloud. Gen AI, I think it's the same sort of milestone platform shift and a trend. And I think in the future, every company in the world will be in some way, shape or form a Gen AI company, using it somewhere in some shape or form.
And that kind of neatly brings us back onto the subject of what we're here to talk about. And that is how Gen AI is being used in cybersecurity. Now, we've touched upon how it's used in business, but how do we apply this to cybersecurity? Now, we internally have our own penetration testing branch within the organization, and we're seeing, and those guys have been testing this. But there's also a lot of vendor products out there that leverage this kind of stuff, so that you can automate a lot of the, certainly when you're doing ethical hacking or you're doing what we call red teaming, where you're aggressively attacking someone else. And that's where we're using AI to automate standardized processes that we would use. So enumeration is a great, when we're doing that initial reconnaissance of a target environment to try and understand, right, what does the lay of the land look like? How are we going to launch the attacks? What if that attack doesn't work? What's going to be our next? All of that kind of stuff to gather information using generative AI. You can do that really quickly and save a lot of time from a manpower perspective. Of course, the flip side to that is that it's not only the good guys that can do this. And what is probably more concerning to my mind is that anything that we're going to invest to develop this stuff, and the same with vendors and stuff like that, they're going to have to invest R&D. The amount of money that they've got available, or the capability that they're going to have to invest in this, probably pales into insignificance against the money that organised crime has behind it. And especially given that they now see the value in continuing and propagating all of the types of modern malware, ransomware, and data exfiltrations and sort of extortion rackets that we see. That, I think, is quite terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. And you always hear this, that the defenders are sort of always 1 foot behind because the attackers are always using the latest and greatest. They have no rule book. There's no guidelines. They're criminals. So there's not process. There's no governance, right? There are no ethics involved here. So they can absolutely run free. And I think there's some things that they will be. This technology in their hands absolutely makes them more effective in some things. And I think you mentioned reconnaissance, right? And I said for a BDR, they get better at knowing your customer. Well, guess what? An attacker can use that to get, to use reconnaissance for the reconnaissance use case to get me a better view of Adam and everything about Adam and everything about CyberLab, right? To then potentially stage a much more targeted, more effective attack. It also, back to Gen AI being generative, phishing is a big thing. This basically removes the language barrier. I can be a broken English hacker, and now can write some pretty fluent emails in whatever language I want.
And that's another thing that's really sort of concerning, and there's something that I often say, and it's that our users can be our weakest link in our cybersecurity defenses, or they can be one of our strongest assets, because they can thwart these phishing email scams and other types of email threats.
The deepfake videos. You
That's
saw that
the other
there.
thing, that this is another thing that Gen AI can be made to make. Which, if you're adding that kind of stuff in, it was many years ago in a previous life, one of the talks that we had someone come in and talk about social engineering, and the story that they told about the extent that an attacker, if it's a targeted attack, and you're talking about whaling or spear phishing here, you're targeting specific individuals, and these individuals, because of the exercise that was going on, they knew that they were going to be in the sights of this company testing them, and the extent that this company went to catch these guys out, especially when these guys had gone and removed all online presence of themselves because they knew that this was coming, and they knew that would be leveraged to build a picture of them. However, they were still they didn't remove their children's or their partner's accounts, and the social engineering organization was able to find out information about, and in particular, the thing that really caught them out was a particular charity that was very, very important to the person that they were targeting. And they eventually posed as that charity. They found out when the next event was, and they crafted such a convincing email that when it was sent to this guy, he clicked it straight away, even though he was being really, really clever and not being caught out by any of the tricks they were trying to catch him with. When this email came through, it was so convincing. It was formatted like the charity formatted it. It had all of the right information in it. It had the dates, and it was like, we want to talk to you about what your sort of contribution is going to be to this coming event. Please click here to add detail, and he did it straight away.
It's like, I mean, that's the whole perfect sales tactic. Know intent and get the right timing, right? We want to do that as salespeople. Same thing with these guys. They want to hit you right where it makes sense. The phishing the attempts that you fall for, or all those ones, like I've just been playing around in Google, and now I've got a Google MFA. That doesn't, and it's the timing is crucial, and that reconnaissance and the target. So I think the social engineering impacts absolutely. They will become more effective, crafting these.
And they're already
emails.
Effective enough.
Yeah,
It's,
exactly.
And there's the number of customers that I talk to, and that they're either using old and outdated security awareness training platforms. They don't really have all they're still conducting phishing simulations once a year. Or we do. The number of times when I've been talking to customers, and they sort of very confidently say, and I kind of feel sorry for them a little bit, because they think they're doing the right thing. It's like, oh yeah, we do phishing simulations at least once a year. And it's like, but you're sending the same email out to everyone, and very quickly you'll see that hardly anyone clicked on it. Well, guess why? Because the ones that did told the other people, don't click on that. That won't happen in a real world scenario.
No, indeed.
And they will all look differently. So no one's going to know that they're being phished. And so the modern approach to it is to have it, the users know this could happen anytime. It puts them so that their shields up all the time around emails. And that, unfortunately, is the sad reality. Now, Gen AI also works for the defenders.
I was going to say, that's right.
The likes of Mimecast, Sophos as well. These organizations invest heavily in this to increase the effectiveness of their email filtering. And that's one of the really cool things that I like. Email filtering is not particularly glamorous, but there's been a couple of events that I've been to, and hearing your guys talk about it and the chaps from Mimecast talking about it, it's the passion that they talk about it, but also the really cool stuff that's going into it behind the scenes.
It is cool.
It's very, very interesting.
So
we're going to sort of wrap it up there. If you're looking at Gen AI, come and talk to CyberLab. We need to understand what it is that you want to achieve. So I think going out there and having a look at what you can achieve, it's understanding and getting ourselves to this slope of enlightenment, so that we're not wasting time trying to do stuff that we can't actually make Gen AI do for us, or it's not going to do very well. And we also need to be keeping an eye on our cyber defenses and making sure that the vendors and the solutions that we're using in our environment to protect us are actually taking advantage of these things. With Vendorland, it's always a battle for them to be keeping one step ahead of the attackers. And the way that organised and cybercrime is progressing, then it doesn't always just progress in one area. So the vendors are then having to put their money on, well, we're going to invest in this, or we're going to invest in that, and it's it's always a cat and mouse game.
Yeah, I guess part of comments for me is the way we think about it in managed services. Gen AI technology should be driven into that managed service to drive operational efficiencies, to get better, to get quicker, to get faster, right? Better triage, automation to therefore give the customer a better outcome, right? From the managed services point of view. Technology and product slightly different. It's implement AI, Gen AI for the use case of lowering the adoption barrier for our users to make it easier for them to interface, to probe data. So think about the investigation layer. How do I interpret these 20 events? AI can help. Command analysis, AI can help. Little chat bot, right, that comes up and you say, hey, natural language search.
It's really good for that kind of stuff.
And that's sort of how we think about it. And I think ultimately, sure, the attackers have the technology. I think the marginal gains, though, are like who stands to benefit most. I think I'm going to be an optimist here, of course. I'm on the defender side. I think it's the defenders who have more of a gain because they started here. The attackers were here. Now this is a leveler up, and I'm really excited for the applications on both the product side and the services side.
Absolutely. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Dave. It's been always a pleasure as usual. And for those of you out there, stay secure.